is Noirin Shirley, and as Dave mentioned, I'm the Executive Vice President of the Apache Software Foundation. But before we go too far into software, free or open source, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my real foundations, my family. My mother is a midwife. She works in the community where I grew up, and her job is all about bringing new life into the world. My father, for his part, is a doctor, running one of the largest and busiest emergency departments in Ireland, serving a population with significant challenges: the elderly, the poor, and immigrants. His job is about saving lives, literally and on a daily basis. So you can see it was easy for me as a child to know what I wanted to do when I grew up. There was only one thing for it, really. I wanted a job that would let me save lives too. Unfortunately, it turns out I'm rather squeamish, so medicine wasn't going to work out. Fortunately, technology in general, and open source and free software in particular, offer us so many possibilities. I'd like to take a few minutes today to talk to you about some projects I'm especially fond of that are dedicated to saving lives and to making the world a better place. We've heard a lot this morning about open democracy, from opening up government data to the idea of running our governments the way we run our open source projects. But one project that began in Kenya is using open source to save lives when the existing democratic process breaks down. Ushahidi started as a website created in the heat of the crisis that followed the 2007 presidential elections in Kenya. As many as 1,000 people lost their lives in the month that followed those elections, as riots and violence broke out across the country. Oriokolo, a Kenyan blogger and activist with a background in law, suggested developing a website that would track eyewitness reports of violence and areas in aid of need in a credible manner. Within days, developers from across the African continent, from the US and further afield, had set up a site that would let the public submit reports, whether of riots, looting, or other violence, either by SMS or online. Local volunteers would attempt to verify those reports by contacting the media or non-governmental organizations on the ground. And the incidents could be displayed on a map using Google Maps. Those on the ground could also request aid, where it was needed and when it was needed. That information could be verified, mapped, and tracked. And the site was extended to be able to accept donations from abroad, all within a week of launch. It would be a pretty impressive commercial organization that could move at that speed, diverting thousands of hours of work at a moment's notice to develop a modular, reusable piece of software, ready to be deployed straight away. But this was all undertaken by volunteers. And although the software was developed to meet a specific local need, as open source software, it took on a life of its own. Shortly after it was rolled out for the Kenyan Troubles, the same software was used to create a site tracking anti-immigrant violence in South Africa. It's since been used to track everything from stocks of vital drugs in pharmacies across East Africa to blocked roads after snowstorms in North America, from deciding where to send volunteers to help with rebuilding after wildfires in Russia, to election monitoring in Mexico and India. Ushahidi has come into its own across the world. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of open source software. But not every crisis is as immediate, visible, or well publicized as the violence that plagued Kenya. Globally, more than 776 million adults do not have even the most basic literacy skills. That's more than 12 times the entire population of France. In fact, it's 1 in every 5 adults across the globe. And of course, it's not as simple as looking at the 2 people to your left and the 2 people to your right. Poor literacy is a problem of opportunity, not of intelligence. Like so many crises, literacy problems disproportionately affect the poor of this world. Even in the developed world, literacy is truly a matter of life or death. For example, not being able to read prescription bottles or hospital forms can kill. A study at the Feinberg School of Medicine, a leading university hospital based in Chicago, showed that older people with inadequate literacy had a 50% higher mortality rate than their literate counterparts. In fact, after smoking, low literacy was the #1 predictor of mortality. In the developing world, not being able to read kills. Not being able to read seed packets or fertilizer instructions limits crop yields. Not being able to read ballot papers or election manifestos limits full participation in a democratic society. Not being able to read how much you're owed and how much you have been paid opens doors to corruption and further exploitation of the poorest of the poor. Literacy Bridge seeks to combat these disadvantages by giving communities in the developing world the tools that they need to grow their own literacy and to obtain and transmit information in immediately accessible, environmentally and culturally appropriate, and locally relevant ways. The Literacy Bridge team have built a device called the Talking Book, designed specifically for people who cannot read and do not have access to electricity. It's the world's most affordable and durable audio device. In the words of the Literacy Bridge team, it's like a small touchpad computer that enables local experts to spread information to the most inaccessible communities on Earth. Before the Talking Book came along, NGOs in places like Ghana would teach local volunteers about topics from agriculture to education, politics to health. These new experts would get in trucks, hop on motorbikes, or go out on foot, visiting villages and rural communities. They would often literally stand in the shade of a tree as people gathered around to hear about what they knew. If you weren't there because you had a sick child or had to tend to the livestock, if you couldn't hear what they were saying because you were sitting down the back, or if you just plain forgot what they said, that knowledge was lost. And there's really only so much information you can take in when somebody has come along on a motorbike and is now standing under a tree explaining things to you. Nowadays, field partners can record information onto a talking book. They distribute the devices to willing participants and give a short demonstration on how to use them. The audio menus are easy to navigate by touch, and users can repeat the information that they're interested in as often as they need to. They can play it back for family and friends, and they can pass the book on to someone else. In fact, in pilots, each talking book was shared between many families. And anyone can record new audio onto the talking book, whether to expand on existing ideas, to share new information, to give feedback, or just to tell their story. Even better, two talking books can be connected to each other to share audio between them, so that new information, updates, and even local translations can be added and passed on without any further technology or expertise required. And of course, it's all open. They're powered by locally available D-cell batteries and freely available open source software. I mentioned a pilot program just a moment ago. 21 devices were sent out to a village of 110 households. But the results were astounding. Where non-crop users in the locality where non-talking book users in the locality saw their crop yields dropping by 5% over the previous year, just wasn't a great year. Farmers who had access to a talking book saw crop yields increase by 48%. That's a return on investment of over 300% in the first year. And of course, the talking book can be used over and over again. More than 91% of those who had access to the talking books applied new health and agricultural practices in their households. And women regularly reported listening to the books with their children. Those of you who are involved in literacy education will know that educating the women has a knock-on effect on the entire community. Of course, when you bring something like this to a new place, people can be skeptical, and so many farmers chose to apply the advice of the talking books on only a portion of their land, reducing the risk in what's such a critical part of their lives. The pictures you see here show the side-by-side difference for one farmer who planted corn using traditional methods in one section of his land and followed the guidance of the talking book when planting an adjacent section. If that isn't saving the world, I don't know what is. But some of you might have come here to listen to me talk about Apache. So let me return to the more mundane side of things for a few moments. By a series of happy accidents, I ended up getting involved with open source software as a teenager. I started contributing documentation to the Apache HTTP server. And as it happens, that server is saving the world, at least by proxy. As we speak, charities around the world are informing the public, they're soliciting volunteers and donations, and they're even carrying out their missions online. And every one of the organizations you see here, as well as many, many others, are able to do this because when the NCSA HTTPD was effectively abandoned, the Apache group took it up. They started working on the server, they wrote patches, and they published those patches in a free and open manner. And that is what means that all of these organizations have access to hundreds of thousands of hours of professional developer time for free. It doesn't cost them a cent. And what's more, if the software doesn't do precisely what they need, it's easy to get someone to tweak it, adapt it, add onto it, so that it does do what they need. It's blissfully simple. Open source is a common good, and each of us receives far more than we put in. No one can take away from us what we've given to an open source or free software project, and yet we can all take from what others have given. We can use it, we can build on it, we can adapt it, we can do whatever we like with it. That is the wonder of open source software. It is the joy of open source software, it is the strength of open source software, and it is how open source software, from crisis management tools to audio players to web servers, can and will and must save the world.